Hi everyone, it's Christoph, and today I'll be showing you the World Chess Championship game from 1972, Round 8. With the white pieces, we have Robert James Fischer, the challenger, and with the black pieces, we have reigning world champion Boris Spassky. This was played in Reykjavik, Iceland. Okay, let's begin. White kicked off the game with c4. Spassky replied with c5, knight c3, knight to c6. Knight to f3, knight to f6, g3, g6, bishop g2, bishop g7, and both sides castled. So far, the position is very symmetrical. Later in the game, white will try to open the center, and black will be open to more exchanges. d4. Pawn takes, knight takes. The bishop on g2 is now liberated. However, we are still in theory, and black maintains strong counterplay. Knight takes, queen takes, pawn to d6, and now bishop to g5. This is a future pin on the event of pawn to e5. For example, kicking the queen back. Well, this knight can't exactly move. If it moves, we're taking the queen on d8. So instead, we see bishop to e6, putting pressure onto the pawn in c4. Queen to f4, putting continuous pressure on f6. Queen to a5. This queen here can't venture too far. It has to defend the bishop on g5. Rook a to c1. And we see the move rook to b8. Keep in mind, earlier, white does not necessarily want to take this pawn. On the event of captures here, there's a very simple rook a to b8. And after the bishop is moved, black simply takes the pawn in b2, and black has a very active rook down the b file. Instead, we see rook a to c1, defending the knight on c3, allowing the move b3 possible. Rook a to b8, b3, and rook f to c8. There is pressure on c4, but b3 defends both threats. Queen to d2, a6, now b5 is on the cards, and bishop to e3. The queen is no longer on d8, the e-pawn isn't moving anytime soon, therefore the pin no longer works. The bishop finds a better job to do on e3, looking over the a7 to g1 diagonal. b5, bishop to a7, and on this move, Spassky makes a large decision. He decides to take the pawn on c4, giving up the exchange. Fischer takes, and Fischer's now down a pawn. The compensation that black has is not only a pawn, but he has an active queen and a rook staring down the b file. We see rook f to d1. Keep in mind, this pawn can't move. If it does, you're dropping d6. We see knight to d7, looking to jump into the c5 square. Knight to d5, offering his queen exchange on d2. It is accepted. Before, Fischer wins back his pawn on e7. King to f8. The queen is taken, and rook takes c4 is played. So far, black has strong counterplay, but white is better. He has a more liberated bishop. Bishop on g7 is liberated, however, the pawn f6 is impossible, as it would it would give the bishop looking at a rock. Rook to b1, bishop to f1, knight to c5, king g2 getting out of pins, a5, e4, bishop to a1, where the idea is to go rook b2, f4, f6, run rook to e2, and the idea is to play e5, king to e6, knight takes rook ec2, excuse me, I was looking at a different line, rook e to c2, putting pressure onto the knight, bishop to b2, this is a waiting move, bishop to e2, the idea is to go bishop g4, this bishop wants to come here, h5 stops that threat, and then rook to d2. In this position, the king can't ever go back to f7, you drive d6. Bishop moves, defending the knight, check, pair of pawns come off, and we see king to e5. Keep in mind, you cannot take this pawn here. If you do, you're dropping a full rook. After rook takes c5, you can take with a pawn or bishop. Assuming you take with a pawn, bishop to d3 is played, and you're now playing down a rook. Instead, the king goes to e5. Rook c to d4. The king finally takes this pawn. It's fine to take now because there's no rook crushing c5. Rook d5, king e6. And after rook takes d6, king e7, rook c6, Spassky threw in the towel, it's dead lost here. There's pressure onto the knight, the pawn will drop on h5, and white is staring down an open d-file. Once the h-pawn is taken, the white king will march through h3 to g4 and run the g-pawn and h-pawns, queening. And yeah, that's all I have for now. I hope you learned something from this game, and thank you for watching. Goodbye.